Welcome to the SoulBodyHorse podcast, where we've dived deep into the horse-human connection. Here we believe in the power of stories and digging deeper, pushing further, and asking the oft unsaid question. I'm your host, Meredith Crawford. Today we have a very special guest with Alissa Mayer. She is the co-instructor of the Equine Hanna Somatics training program and the creator of the Feel-Embodied system and a somatic approach to horsemanship. Thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm excited to be here.
To help give our listeners an orientation, can you just break down what is the somatic nervous system? What is a somatic approach?
The word somatic, it's been kind of like commandeered by this movement that we're witnessing or experiencing in, especially in the horse industry, but in the whole human industries, to describe a bunch of different things. It's like become this buzzword. And originally the word somatic comes out of a medical terminology, and it means the body or of the body. The somatic nervous system is a term I think that people use to describe the part of the nervous system that involves the body, which I would have to say would be the entire nervous system, if you were to ask me, because it's the system that runs the body. So the somatic approach that I use is specifically based in Hanna Somatics work, which is where we work with a specific part of the nervous system. And it's the part of the brain that controls movement and mediates muscle tension and muscle relaxation. When I say somatics or someone's asking me about my somatic approach, it comes out of the work of Hanna Somatics working with a particular reflex that particularly interfaces with the nervous system with a specific effect on a specific part of the brain and a specific part of kind of the function of the body. And that's the neuromuscular system.
And just to further help our listeners orientate themselves within the somatic field, there is somatic experiencing and the Hanna Somatic approach as two very different somatic approaches. But can you kind of break down some of the differences?
What Hanna Somatics is, and what I do with horses and with people, we teach people to either within their own body and nervous system or to help a horse get to this place to access the part of the brain that controls muscles and movement and tension levels by tapping into a natural reflex. And that reflex is called pendiculation. So the whole approach of Hanna Somatics is designed around getting a body to do pendiculation, which is a reflex we're all pre-programmed with. And this reflex will naturally reset our baseline tension levels. That's the goal of the work that we're doing when we do Hanna Somatics or when we do Equine Hanna Somatics. So it's a movement-based type of education. We're using the movement that the body can do to access or trigger a natural reflex within the nervous system of each individual person or individual horse.
Let's talk about pendiculation for a moment. Can you break down what does pendiculation look like and how is it different than stretching?
Stretching is a thing you do. Pendiculation is a reflex that you're programmed with, and it's generally an involuntary reflex. If you want to get technical, it's a polysynaptic reflex, meaning it has like a bunch of moving parts and different places that get activated in the nervous system. We all do it. Humans do it. Horses do it. Actually, all animals do it. And even though most of us initially aren't familiar with the term pendiculation, we are all familiar with pendiculating or what it is. You've done it with your own body every time you yawned. A yawn is a type of pendiculation. You can't stop a yawn once it starts. It's an involuntary process. Once it happens, it happens. Animals do it. Most people who have pets are really familiar with the kind of stretch looking movement that a cat or dog will do after they've taken a nap, or horses will do if you get to be there when they get up from taking a nap. They'll do these kind of big full body, most people call them funny stretches, where they'll stretch out one or two legs, or they'll do kind of like a cat stretch thing with their body, or they'll arch their back. Even chickens do it, when they stretch out their wing and then all their feathers kind of one by one spread out, or a cat will spread out their toes. Those are all versions of pendiculation. And what it does is it includes a big contraction and then a very slow and luxurious decontraction of a particular group of muscles, whether that's in the paw, in the wing, along the top line of a horse, depending on what the movement is, because you can't do all the muscles at once. So there's a bunch of different moves or pendiculations that animals do. And the purpose of pendiculation is to prepare the body for effective movement after being curled into a ball or not moving for a while.
So you've worked with Hanna Somatics within the equine context and also with riders for quite a while now. Like, what are the changes that you see affected in the horses and in the riders that you work with?
So much of the kind of issues that we deal with in the horse world, whether that's trying to help a horse achieve levels in competition or help a rider sit correctly on a horse or training and behavior issues, can be traced back to a body dysfunction issue. Things that I used to get hired as a horse trainer to try to fix or help people with, I'm finding that most of those, I'd say 80%, maybe even more than that, of the things I used to get hired as a trainer to fix, I can resolve faster and better by doing Equine Hanna Somatics with the horse or helping the rider learn enough Hanna Somatics to fix their own tension issues in their body to resolve those, because they're not training issues. You know, if a horse can't do something, in my experience, most of the time, it's because they physically can't do it. And then if you try to make them do it through using more pressure or one of the zillions of kind of training aids or strategies that people have come up with over the years, the horse will resist. Either they'll resist kind of in a passive way where their body just won't do it, or they'll get frustrated or upset, or they'll be in pain and then they react because of that. And that's not a training issue. We have come up with, and when I say we, I mean like the collective people who do horses, we've come up with ways to deal with those and strategies and training techniques and things. But what I've found is that by doing Equine Hanna Somatics, you can just remove the restriction that's preventing the horse from saying yes or from performing or connecting or doing whatever it is that we're asking them for. And most of the time, they're very happy to do what we ask when they're physically able and they're not being blocked by so much muscle tension that they are limited in their range of motion, or so much muscle tension that when they try to go right, it hurts. So they choose to go left, or so much muscle tension that they walk around constantly bent to the left because they just can't unwind it and go to the right. And it's unconscious muscle tension. So the horse doesn't know they're doing it, just like you don't know when you're slouching or when you're sitting crooked, because you just have learned that that's the way your body is. And then you don't feel it anymore. You get used to it. And so we can unwind those things with Hanna Somatics. And all of a sudden, same day or like within a couple of days, this horse or this rider that couldn't go straight or couldn't sit straight or had limited range of motion or had back pain, it melts away. And suddenly things that were hard become easy.
So let's talk about that pain issue. Prior to pushing the record button, Alissa and I were chatting about my sciatic nerve, which got crushed when a horse bucked me off, 10, 11 years from now, and then I still deal with from time to time today. Alissa, you had an interesting perspective on dealing with nerve pain, such as what I've experienced.
So you were telling me that even years later, when you get off of a horse, sometimes you have to be careful when you're in a dressage saddle with a tall cantle, right? Because you have to lift your leg higher to get off. And that can trigger your old sciatic nerve pain. And the reason that can be so easily triggered even all these years later is most of the time because you still have some chronic low-level tension in the muscles in that area around your hip. And when there's low-level tension that you don't even know is there already in a muscle, when you go to use that muscle, you're more likely to experience a muscle spasm. And a muscle spasm is when all of the fibers kind of trigger all at once and the muscle pulls or becomes like a Charlie horse, or, you know, we've most of us have experienced that. And when it does that, it presses on the things around it. So it'll press on a nerve that passes nearby. It'll pull on its attachments. And if the nerve runs, you know, close to the bone or something, it can get squished up against the bone. And that's what's triggering the pain when like all of a sudden you were okay and then it gets triggered. And that low-level chronic tension is exactly the kind of tension that we know how to reverse and return to baseline using Hanna Somatics. So that's a great example of the potential of this work because we're reversing that accumulation of tension, because we're getting your own brain to return you back to your original baseline level of resting muscle tension before the accident. We can reverse or unwind things like that most of us have been led to believe are going to be permanent or are a natural part of like the aging and living life experience to accumulate aches and pains and stiffness and to still experience issues after an injury. Even though you're healed, you still have pain or compensations or things that are different. And so much of that is reversible because it has to do with chronic tension that you can change if you can access the part of the brain that controls it.
How does chronic tensional, and it sounds like even low-level chronic tension, build up in muscles?
Well, the first thing I want to say is it doesn't build up in the muscle. The muscle is kind of at the mercy of the brain. So if a muscle is tight or is holding chronic tension, those are kind of two ways of saying the same thing. It's happening to the muscle. It's not happening in the muscle, if that makes sense. Because muscles they can't have memory. There's no like brain cell in the muscle to remember things. The only thing in your body that can remember something is your brain. So if a muscle is staying tight, it's because the brain is telling it to stay tight. How does that happen? Well, muscles respond to instructions coming out of the brain, and a lot of different parts of the brain can send out those instructions in the form of impulses that come from the brain, travel down the spinal cord, then they exit the spinal cord and go through a nerve and eventually synapse on or talk to the muscle tissue itself. And several parts of the brain can initiate that process where they send information out. Most of those parts of the brain are in the unconscious part of our brain. They're part of your autopilot system that takes care of all the functioning. And thank goodness we have that, because the conscious brain, right, that you think of as you, does not know your anatomy, your neuromuscular physiology, and have the ability to control your body around in a fine or perfect way. I study anatomy and I don't know it. Like, I'll never be as good as my lizard brain is at driving my body around. So that's what is happening most of the time. Like, you guys can't see me, but I'm watching myself talk with my hands right now. And the unconscious part of my brain is what's controlling most of my movement. And that is the same for horses. The thing is, the unconscious part of the brain is dedicated mostly to survival processes, which are mostly concerned about survival in the moment. When that part of your brain activates a muscle contraction to do something, like if you're a horse, to spook, or if you're being hunted, to jump out of the way of the tiger, or to hide or crouch or go fetal, or one of those kind of reflexes that we all do. It's thinking in the moment. It's not thinking long term about like the potential after effect of contracting those muscles. So it activates the muscle and then it goes on to the next survival thing that your lizard brain has to do. And what happens is when that is repeated, kind of in an effort to be efficient, you repeat something enough, your brain will keep a little bit of tension there, knowing that it's going to need it again. And this is how muscle memory is created, what we think of as muscle memory. You repeat something enough that it kind of becomes an unconscious, easy, quickly accessible movement pattern or technique or piece of choreography or postural position or something. You repeated it enough that your brain, which is obsessed with being efficient, just sort of keeps it there all the time because you're using it so much. And then anything that you do and you keep doing, you habituate to. And that just means you get so used to it, it becomes your normal. And then you don't feel it anymore. And you literally don't feel it anymore. So you can't feel that you're crooked, or you can't feel that you have low level tension in your back muscles, which all of us do. And when that accumulates enough, it starts to feel like pain. But in the beginning, it's just a little bit of extra tension that we don't notice. And then we go about our day. But then that tension reduces our range of motion a little bit. So it changes how we do things. And then we do things a little bit different. And we repeat how we do something different enough times that we now develop muscle memory or habituate to doing something a little bit different, a little bit crooked, using a little bit of a different muscle to compensate for one that's not working so well, or whatever it is that we're doing. You've habituated now to the original piece of tension, and now you've habituated to the little bit of compensatory tension, either in the same muscle or a muscle nearby or something, and that accumulates throughout our whole life. And the same thing happens to horses.
Fascinating. So as you were speaking, one of the things my mind jumped to is posture. And posture, especially equine posture, has become a buzzword or a buzzy topic. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like postural deviations can be created by this habitual, we'll say, loading of the muscles or loading of that impulse to engage a muscle. So then can it also be unwound? If posture can be changed, can conformation also be changed? Conformation being, we'll say, the horse's natural, quote unquote, posture that it was more or less born with?
I think of conformation versus posture a little bit differently.
Okay, please.
So conformation is the structure that you're born with, or that your genetically defined structure, because our structures, basically our bones and our connective tissue, all that stuff grows with us, because we start out small and then we get bigger, just like horses. But there's like a predetermined length of your bones, density of your bones, how your ligaments attach. Some people have or horses have genetic predispositions to have more flexible or stretchy ligaments. Some of us have tighter ligaments, and that's what holds the bones together. So that gives structure to when you string bones together in the skeleton. That's conformation, is the structural component. And then when you stack it all up, all other things being equal, that conformation is part of posture. But posture is more how the structural elements are organized and how they're presented or held together, right? So conformation is permanent, is not changeable. Posture is changeable. That's an easy way to think of the difference, right? So I bet the people who are listening to this, you guys, every time you hear us say the word posture, you probably sit up straighter. And now you're performing better posture. Just like a really good rider can get on almost any horse and put the horse together, right? And help that horse have better posture. That's what we're all probably doing right now, because I keep saying posture and we're talking about it. So everyone's sitting up straighter, right? For me, when I hear the word posture, my mom I pictured her standing behind me and she's kind of like looking at me like, stand up straight, Alissa, No matter our conformation, we can all perform pretty darn good posture in the moment. Even if we have issues and pain and a poor fitting saddle, or we're wearing high heels or one of those things, we can all in the moment perform great posture. But that's a performance. There's two kinds of posture. There's your performance posture. Can everybody take a breath and relax? Now, this is your actual posture, or your real posture, or your habitual posture, right? Ooh. So for me, when I relax my performance posture, I slouch forward. My head kind of comes forward. The way my weight on my seat bones, because I'm sitting right now, changes. Right? My belly softens and I'm no longer sucking in my gut, right? That's pretty normal things that most of us do when we relax. What most people don't know is why we do that. We're taught, or we think that it's because we're lazy, or because we don't have enough core strength, or because our mom didn't remind us enough when we were growing up to have good posture, right? But that's actually not what's happening. What's happening is that the muscles on the front of my torso have a little bit of low grade, or maybe a lot, I don't know, chronic muscle tension in there, but it's habitual tension. It's unconscious tension. So the muscles on the front of my body have more tension than the muscles on the back of my body. So when I relax, all other things being equal, me sitting here kind of in a chair, letting gravity have its way with me, wherever there's more tension, I'm going to slump that way. So I slouch forward. People who have been trained since they were kids in dance, in ballet, or who have been in, sometimes I see this in people who did a lot of cheerleading, where they've had their hands behind their back in that cheerleader posture, or people who've been in the military and been in like the at attention posture a lot, or people who, and horses, this could all be applied to horses, who are startled frequently, or who have anxiety and who are like kind of paranoid. They tend to have more tension on the back side of their body. They don't know they have it. They just know that they tend to have more of an arch in their spine and be more tending that way when they relax. And they have to consciously kind of tuck their tail and flatten their back out a little bit to go into a neutral spine position, is how it's described a lot of times. But as soon as you relax your performance, you go back to your habitual posture. So that could be a hollow back. That could be a slump forward. That could be leaning over to one side. If you were bucked off a horse and crashed into the wall and had an injury on that side, for example, your body will naturally contract around areas where you've had an injury, even if that was 10 years ago. So the injury might have healed, but the contraction of that reflexive, going fetal, or going to protect that area can still be there. Because if you hold it long enough while you're recovering from your injury, your brain will habituate that muscle contraction. It will become incorporated into your baseline kind of normal posture. You can't feel it anymore. And what you can't feel, you can't change.